Good morning, Vietnam. I mean, it's actually like Vietnam's like 12 hours ahead, so I think it's actually like good evening, Vietnam. Anyways, guys, what's up? It's me, Carl. I'm back this week hosting. I hope you guys were nice to Jess last week. You're probably sitting at home right now thinking like, new intro, who dis? Well, it's the new title of our show. It's The Breakdown because of like casting breakdowns and breaking down the news. Get it, guys? We're really proud of it, so be supportive. We'll still be tackling a news item every week, and we will still be focusing on sexual, domestic, and interpersonal violence. But we've been talking, and we've realized that by doing this show over the past few weeks, is we as artists have been trained to empathize. It's literally our job. And so we wanted to widen the net a little bit and amplify the voices of our artist's perspective for everything that's going on. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're going to do the same show, but a different show, but the same show. So we're glad to have you. This week, we're going to be diving into allegations that are hitting the Dallas Mavericks organization. But before that, let's meet our guests. Hey guys, what's going on?
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. So first off, here we have Antoine Ramon. He is currently a universal swing for Hamilton, which includes the New York, Chicago, and 2 touring companies. Now, a fun fact that you might not know about Antoine is he has a tattoo of a koala, which is one of his favorite animals. Now, I'll let you guys ask Antoine where that tattoo is later. Facebook is family friendly. We can't really get into that. Now, Antoine, real quick. When you say that you are the universal swing for Hamilton, does that mean that Hamilton's going to Mars soon? Or what's...
We're waiting for security clearance before I can answer that question. But
gotcha. Gotcha. NASA has to approve it?
It's an incredibly fancy term that just means when there are multiple equity companies currently running Broadway show, they can have a swing that is able to work with any one of those companies as needed. So, and it's also a very unique title as well, because not many shows are really big enough to have
running
multiple...
in 15 different places.
Yeah. So
Hamilton's taking it over. Hamilton's going to be the next McDonald's or like Starbucks. You're going to go like down to the bodega and they'll be doing Hamilton inside and it'll still be literally amazing. It'll still be great. Jess, now we have also our founder and Wonder Woman, yes. Jessica Ryan, coming to us from sunny Los Angeles, where it is 8 a.m. and I had to pull her in last minute because we were having technical issues. So everybody, let's just give Jess another round of applause.
Thank you. That should really be for my golden retriever friend Bentley, because he's literally sitting right across from me. He's about to come up here, not happy that we have not been on our walk yet this morning.
Honestly, I wouldn't be happy either. Like, I went for a walk. I went down to my deli and got a muffin. So if I were Bentley, I'd be pissed.
He'll make an appearance at some point. He's too cute to stay mad at.
Oh, sure. So guys,
like me.
Before we really get into this discussion, I have something very serious that I want to talk about this week. Have you guys seen Black Panther?
I saw it opening night.
You saw it opening night?
Yes.
Literally, no spoilers, obviously, but any show that uses the insult of colonizer is like right in my MySpace top 8.
Yes, that is great.
Threw that line out there, and I like had to like brace my chair for impact. It was amazing. It was great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic,
really interesting
film.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
And I don't follow any Marvel comics, so I just went into it just to watch a film.
Yeah.
And so I can't speak to the history of Marvel comics and how accurate it is, but just as an overall film,
well, that's so cool that they were able to like pull that off, because it's like in the middle of a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
So like the fact that it can stand alone is awesome.
Yeah.
I think they're pulling it in, aren't they, to like the Civil War movies and stuff like. I mean, I know that it's already been woven in a little bit, but right. There's another one my nerd friends have been telling me about that's like they're gonna have a lot to do with Black Panther.
Yes, the new Avengers movie.
Yeah. Oh, Avengers. That's right.
Yeah. Infinity War. Oh, I'm a nerd. I know.
There was an Avengers Civil War, I believe.
That's right.
So you were not
You're
far
like, Jess, you're not completely.
There are lots
clueless.
of wars. Civil War, Infinity War, all the wars. We're getting some viewers coming in, and Martin Wilson also thinks Black Panther rocked. So we appreciate you, Martin.
And even if you don't think it rocked, that's fine. You don't have to.
That's fine.
True.
That's true.
Actually, I had a couple friends who like didn't think it was that great.
I mean, I think that it's like semi like thinking Beyonce's not great. Like you have to be careful to have that opinion.
Sure.
It's if you saw that SNL skit where like you said Beyonce isn't great and then people like show up in your house and like take you. I feel like it's almost that level. I'm just saying, I saw some people leaving the theater and they were like, I don't know how I felt. And then they didn't, like, all of a sudden people with like bag over their head out the door.
Will this show be good if we just sit here and laugh the whole time?
I mean, people will
break down.
Yeah, people are going to think it's entertaining at least, you know, like they'll be like, oh, look, they're laughing. This must be a great show.
And I will likely pee my pants, so that can help too.
Also, Jess, Jermaine says, I could guess who those friends were who hated it. So
I didn't hate it.
That's a little tea, I think.
But he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Jermaine's literally like at home and he's still busting jokes. Like he's not even on this week and he's still like being silly.
Tune into the comments for the best time.
So guys, I need you real quick. Again, we'll get this conversation going, but we got lots of material this week, I feel like. So Jess, Jermaine, and I got in like a little group chat to try and like figure out what we want the new name of the show to be and other things. And one of the main options that we went with was that I should change my name to Mark, and it could be Marky Mark and the Spunky Brunch as our name. There was... It
was literally a mile-long Slack thread as we just threw out bad titles.
I'm like trying to scroll through and like pull things out, and it's literally so long. We started going through like Broadway style stuff, and we were like, Broadway Notebook, half-hour call, and then Jess goes zip, zap, zop. Literally, we would get so close, and then every time Jess would pull out some just like crud and be like, just like put a break.
You're not even telling them the funny ones.
What was the? I'm trying. It's hard to. It's hard to do all these things. Which one?
I don't know. One of the dumb now it's not going to be funny because I just said it was going to be funny.
Jess suggested we should call it Love Actually.
Because people would watch it.
Because people would watch it, which is like, I mean, honestly, not wrong. At one point, so we use Slack, and there's this little Slack bot that gives you information. At one point, I tried to ask the Slack bot if we could just kick Jess off for like 15 minutes. It didn't answer. But
I'm not a lot of help most times.
Not a lot of help. Anyways, let's be productive, because I feel like that's the whole point of what we're trying to do. We like making jokes, but we also like being productive. So guys, we are talking about this week. There was a Sports Illustrated article that came out exposing allegations that were made against the Dallas Mavericks organization, specifically against the president, CEO, and a beat writer, one of their like main writers for their website and other things, detailing sexual harassment and domestic violence against the writer. And one of the main issues that came across with this is that multiple people seem to have taken this to HR and nothing happened, which is a little scary. And so, guys, I think I want to start off by talking about when you find yourself in a position where literally the like top guy is the one who is being a problem, is sexually harassing and other things. How do you go about that? How do you navigate that?
You want to take that, Antoine?
Well, I have not had much experience in that, or even known anyone that has shared with me that they've had much experience with that. So I can only answer based on how I feel and what I think I would do. And I can understand the hesitancy of the employees, the concern for their job, for their well-being. And also I want to just think, why does that fear have to be such a large part that keeps people quiet and keeps disgusting people in power? Yeah. And I don't have the answer to that. I mean, I have my answer to that, but that's not going to work for each person. My thought and my feeling would be seek out other employees or someone and then move forward from there. You know, at the beginning of the article, it says like a woman who got the job, her friends are like, oh, make sure you're not in the elevator with the president. And I think, how would I even be able to go to work knowing that that's a possibility?
Yeah. So Jermaine just asked on Facebook, you said, I would assume a report to HR. Can that be done somewhat anonymously? And I would say yes. And he said so that it's reported in the case of retaliation.
We're asking a bunch of artists who don't work in 9 to 5.
Who don't work in corporate.
Can you go to HR? I don't know.
and I think in this case, people did go to HR. The problem is that HR was covering. And a few times it seems to really have been brushed under the rug. And once specifically, one of the vice presidents, the little quote we put at the beginning of this, one of the vice presidents took an employee into the car and then threatened her and was like, you need to keep your mouth shut. He's the boss. Deal with it, which is just wild.
That's a pretty old school attitude too, right? I might be out of turn on that, but it feels like like old school attitude that's not connected even to harassment specifically, but just like in general. He's the boss.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of not wanting to break up the status quo.
Right.
And a thought that occurred to me in reading the article, so many times men tell women, he's the boss, deal with it, XYZ, ABC. What if those men who say deal with it were in a position where they just come across a alpha male who doesn't really care and were to go up to some man and say, I want to touch you, or I want to feel you, or whatever, to another man.
Or touch you and feel you.
Yeah. And I mean, those things do happen in the business world, but we don't hear about them a lot. But my thought is, it's honestly the golden rule that we learned as children: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And what switch in someone's brain turns off for them to say, deal with this, they're the boss? Like, when do you stop being a human?
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that is interesting. So I am a person who I try really often to like be self-reflective and like think about things that I have experienced and did I deal with them in the best way, all that kind of stuff. And when I was in college, there was a professor who sexually harassed a lot of the female students. And I remember being like, he's not going to do anything. It's not that bad. Like, you just got to ignore it. And now Carl now is like, no, fuck that. Sorry if you're a kid. Like, forget that. That's not how we deal with this. That's inappropriate. That's not okay. And go ahead, Jess.
Oh, I was just gonna say the nice thing about human beings, the positive part of that is like when you know someone personally, you expect the best of them, and we default to like, this is not. I'm wrong about this. This person is good. You know
There's
what I mean?
no way they
good,
could do that. They're good to
right,
me.
yeah. And good is a sliding scale, so it's a dangerous label to use, I know, but yeah, and that's not a bad thing. That's something we have to deal with when we come up with solutions for stuff like this. Like, that is a part of life on this earth as a human being, as we tend to default to assume the people we know and interact with are not doing something that's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I think that part of what finally got me there is that I then became the subject of some sexual harassment from another person who was in power at our university. And once I was in their shoes, it's different. And that kind of is what I think smacked me out of it, to be like, you were being a bad ally and you've got to do better about it. And I think that that's what we all have to start trying to be better allies in this situation when people are getting taken advantage of.
I have Amanda Archangelis, sorry, one of my favorite writers, just commented ego on, like, about this, and like, what do you do? Like, how do you even fix that?
So I have a theory, and I don't know if I've talked about it on here before, but maybe I have. So I think that for years and years, there was no social reckoning when it came to sexual harassment and whatnot in the workplace. Like, if it happened, no one made you feel bad that you did that you were harassing people. And I think that we are finally getting to a space where that happens, and there's at least the thought of, hey, dude, maybe you shouldn't do that. And it's a shame that it has taken so long for us to get there, but at least finally it is happening. Like, there are social constructs to make it so that you don't want to steal. There are some people who see no issue with stealing from Walmart or Gap or whatever, but like, there are laws in place that punish you for that. And finally, we are starting to put those together for men in these situations. Like, had with Al Franken, when he was taking illicit photos of a woman while she was asleep, like groping her and whatnot. Had the person who was taking the picture said, "Oh, maybe you shouldn't do this. This is bad," it would have ended there. But no one did that. And I think that finally we're getting to the place where people are starting to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that.
It's interesting. I mean, immediately thought of Kelly Weaver on our comments, just said, train the younger generation, respect and consequences, which is like, so yesterday I spent the morning with a bunch of 10th graders from a high school here in Los Angeles. And they went through it's theater-based training at Theater of the Oppressed, if anyone's interested, training for sexual assault and sexual harassment. So it's very participatory, right? The kids watch scenes that are really well written and very, very real, like not actory. And then they break down the scene. And then, like, in phases, they start intervening in the scene and change the course of the scene and basically practice, right? Like, how to change things. And they learn about consequences and all of that stuff. And this is just a little like right turn, but something that's worth talking about, because we're talking about consequences for men specifically. What I heard yesterday is that these young boys that are 16 and don't have that toolbox or fully understand the lines between right and wrong in this situation are scared. They are scared that people are coming for men and that their lives could be ruined by making a mistake that they didn't know was wrong. And that's not how they put it, right? They were just like, the kids were like, well, people's lives are getting ruined, and this statistic and this statistic. But what I heard was, like, in trying to teach these young guys the consequences and stuff, like, they are super scared. Yeah. That they're going to mess up.
I think that fear and concern in this respect specifically can be helpful. I mean, I, in general, don't like to live from a place of fear. But when you have an understanding of the consequences of your actions, that's necessary. And also, it means you aren't a sociopath.
It's helpful.
Yeah. Really. You know, and so I think for younger generations to have some awareness of, oh, wow, okay, I need to be more conscious about how I react to things, and whatever that is for them is necessary because there's so much stimulation. Sex and sexuality is such a norm for younger generations. It was so taboo when I was a kid. If you had Cinemax, you're like, oh my gosh, Cinemax. But now you've got the reality stars of the world. There's a family of them that I don't want to mention by name. And so I'm not, you know who they are. That sex is their biggest marketing tool. And it's everywhere. And young men and young women, boys and girls, are on social media physically sharing themselves in my underwear, in my bathing suit, which is fine. You're at the beach, that's fine. But you're in your bedroom, social media is not the place for that. And so there's been this desensitization or desensitizing of the severity and the seriousness of what sexuality and what sex is. So younger generations are just kind of like, oh, well, I can say and do almost anything because they don't understand the weight of those actions. And to see what it is, I think they are getting a better idea of what that is.
I have a devil's advocate question for that, though. So what, in terms of like trying to pursue solutions to problems, that doesn't really apply to like the president of the Mavericks who grew up in the, I assume, the 50s, right?
Actually,
like,
he's pretty young. So yeah, I think when he took his job in the late 90s, he was in his 30s. So he now would be like late 40s, early 50s. So he's not an 80-year-old or a 70-year-old.
Right. So born in the late 60s or early 70s, but still not social media generation.
For sure. Sorry.
Yeah. Like no, not at all. Thanks for the correction, because that's an important difference. But anyway, I just am curious, like whether this is so baked in, like some people in the comments are saying with and you, Carl, the idea of masculinity, that like if it's not social media giving it permission, it's the next thing, it's the next thing, it's the next thing.
Well, I mean, I'm personally a big believer that the majority of our problems, period, stem from toxic masculinity. And I say that to mean that I think that boys and men are scared to show certain sides of them. And that creates this idea of like, I have to be this like masculine caveman tough guy. And that's what people want from me. And if I show anything else, I'm weak and I am not a man. Because so much, I mean, you see branding and like things all the time where it's like, come on, be a man, or even that can be seen as like, you know, these boys need to learn what it's like to be a man. That's taking responsibility. That means saying you're apologizing when it's your fault. And it's like, that has nothing to do with being a man. That has to do with being a good adult. That has to do with being a good human. And I mean, even like with what we've seen with the shooting, I think that we are teaching boys that they have to be these strong, powerful characters. And then people are finding out that they don't fit that bill, that they are not necessarily strong, and everyone doesn't respect them. And they don't have all of these things granted to them that they thought they did, and they don't know how to deal with it. And obviously, shooting is like such an extreme, right? But we see it that's what creates domestic violence. That's what leads to so many issues.
Yeah, it's very true. And somehow over time, the thought of if you are a man, you are not sensitive. If you are a man, you do not express yourself emotionally. If you are a man, you cannot show compassion in a social setting. Somehow that became the conversation.
You can't say your friend is attractive.
Yeah. And I'm not sure where that started. There is a documentary on Netflix that I watched, and I'm going to find it and then put it in the comments because I don't want to name the documentary. But the topic of it essentially is it focuses on men and how our upbringing sculpts who we become. And it starts as early as, I think, 3 to 5 years old. And it was so remarkable watching it because especially, I think that is, we're seeing the bloom of like that seed of men are stoic, men are providers, men are strong, men aren't emotional. And then men don't know how to express themselves emotionally. And then it aggressively presents itself with sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, sexual assault.
And some men are stoic and some men are all those things, but it doesn't have to be every man. I mean, my fiance, Kelly, I'm sure she'll tell you in the comments here in a bit, I cry a lot. It like is something that still really embarrasses me because I have those like thoughts in my head that showing these emotions makes me weak. It makes me not a good partner. It makes it so that I am not a man, you know, like all that stuff starts going through my head. And so it's difficult to reckon with, but I'm just not that person. I'm not the person to trudge along and never show an emotion and things like that. But also my emotions is what helps me be super empathetic and what helps me to feel on a deep level, which connects me to things. And, you know, like that doesn't mean that's not bad. And men are allowed to be those things.
Yes, it's healthy. And the expression of emotion, we all have emotions. Again, unless you're a sociopath, then they're skewed in a very different way.
Yeah.
Or there's something chemically wrong with you. But in a general sense, we all have emotions. And to deny the expression of those is not healthy. And that's why people have ulcers, high blood pressure, migraines, any number of health issues, because you're bottling everything up. You would never boil a pot of water with a cork in it because it's going to explode. So why would anyone...
No, I'm serious. I didn't know that. I would have totally boiled a cork.
Well, no, not a cork in the water. I'm just saying, you would never steal a pan of water to boil and not expect
I don't understand your metaphors.
Sorry. So let's start over.
Jess doesn't understand basic physics. We got to really take it. We got to bring it down a little bit. You're in like AP physics right now. We need to go to like intro to.
Y'all,
so
I
what
would
I'm
be a
saying
fan
is,
dancing, all right?
And she's fierce.
Tapper.
So what I'm trying to say is, like, we all possess a multitude of emotions, and to think that we can isolate some of them because they make us uncomfortable or might perceive us to be weak is not realistic. I mean, so take frying a turkey for Thanksgiving. They always say thaw it out because, I mean, water and oil are not a good combination. So if you fry a frozen turkey and it melts, that water combines with the oil and you get an explosion. Like, that's just naturally going to happen. So you have to figure out, like, how do I process these things? And men aren't often being given the tools to know how to process their emotions, because somehow, somewhere, we can learn, oh no, don't show emotion, which is never expressed that way. It says don't show weakness. So men think emotion equals weakness. Yeah. Don't show weakness.
And as a female too, just from the female perspective, what I think is great about like documentaries that you were mentioning and understanding the problems in the way that you've just broken them down for us is that, I mean, obviously knowledge is power and power affects change, you know, that affects change. But But maybe more importantly, at least to me, is really arming yourself with a toolkit and the understanding of how this has happened allows us to steer away from like what those kids are so worried about, which is like bad person, sexual harasser, like you did a bad thing, you just blanket bad person, and understanding that we actually have like a root problem to fix if we want to do something about this. You know what I mean?
And I want to clarify that toxic masculinity is not solely fault of men. And it does not mean that men are bad, because I often, growing up, something that bothered me was, I have 2 older sisters and they have whipped me into shape on so many things. But I always really wanted to be respectful and like never wanted to cross boundaries with women as much as I could. And I remember having lots of people on social media and other things be like, if a man asked me if he could kiss me, the answer would be no. If he doesn't know just to kiss me, then, he's not the kind of man I want to be with. And that adds into this, it adds into this idea that men don't need to ask for consent and things like that. And that's a scary idea.
And as women, we need to understand what we mean and what we actually want. Like Jermaine talks about that a lot, being specific. Like, of course, like I love it when a guy I trust and I understand and know, doesn't ask permission to do something like kiss me. But making a blanket statement like that as a female, we have responsibility there too. That's dangerous because that's not what I want. I don't want some dude I don't know to just kiss me. So like, careful with our words,
Yeah.
So real quick, I want to, just for like the last couple minutes, I want to bring it back to the article. There was one thing in there that I found really interesting. And Antoine, you've done training with the CVTC, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to ask your opinion on this. So at one point it says that 2 of the employees who had been experiencing sexual harassment from the president started documenting it. And so they had like April 8th at 12:35, he, in a meeting, touched my upper thigh, things like that. Is that something that people who are feeling helpless in these situations should begin doing? Is that like a good idea?
In the training that I did, so I did some training to be an advocate. So if someone was sent to the emergency room, then they would call someone who would be available to be there go between the nurses and the police officers, because when you're in that state of trauma, questions and things being asked to you, you can't think about that. So it's nice to have someone there that has that understanding. So that's kind of what my training was with CVTC. But to answer your question, I think documentation is very helpful and important for 2 reasons. You have it as the individual. So if someone asks a question, did this happen or when did it happen? You can detail to them what that is. And ideally, they would be able to actually file a formal complaint. Second, I'm a processor, and oftentimes getting thoughts out of my head and onto paper helps me process what is happening. And I think that could in some ways be therapeutic for the individual. So that way you aren't running a conversation of, did I make that up? Am I just crazy? Did I think that whole thing happened? You write it down when it happens. This is what it is. These are the details. Yes, this happened. I'm not crazy.
Because that seems to be a popular defense of predators, is that never happened. This person is making these things up. And memory is so weird, like we can't relive those moments physically. And so eventually you can swirl and think that you did just make these things up. Like you can convince yourself of that.
Yeah. And honestly, if you are a gross person performing gross acts, you're not going to remember them as gross. Like, oh, I was just being flirty, or because you've already rationalized the action because you've taken the action. So in that person's mind, and granted, there have been things that I've done that I'm not proud of, but I'm sure in doing them, I was like, well, that didn't seem so bad. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, that was not the best way to have handled that situation.
And Jermaine just said in the comments, and it makes so much sense. He was like, well, I'm just going to read it. You know what? It's rough, but what has somewhat helped in the cover is the coverage of police shootings. It's secret filming and recording if it's repeated harassment. I mean, the laws on recording are different, but there's some leverage. And that the police recordings maybe like tipped culture a little bit, right? And said, well, just let everyone know you can do something about this, even though these people are in a unequal balance of power to you, you know?
Yeah. It's a matter of accountability.
Because if you go back through someone's notebook or someone's calendar or whatever, and you can tell that like it was written in different pens at different times, and it, you know, like it becomes legitimate, which is something that we have to start tooling people with. We have to give them a way to feel like they can defend themselves, essentially.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, as many ways as possible will be helpful, because not every way is going to work for every person. Not every way will be available to every person. So it's, do what you can. If you can't record it, write it down as soon as you can, or, you know, whatever that might be for each person.
Yeah.
Because and also it's a source of empowerment for yourself. If you are the person on the receiving end of that, if you've taken the proper channels, gone to HR, gone to your supervisor, gone to your boss, and they've done nothing, then at the very least, you can have documentation for yourself to know, I know this happened. This is what it was. And if the time comes, I'm going to have it here ready and available and say, this is it. I told these other people and they didn't care, but here it is. And now you want to know, and I'm going to tell you.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, guys, that is about all the time that we have for today. This has been a great discussion. We'll be back again next Sunday at 10:30, hopefully at 10:30 that time, because I will have done my due diligence and I will make sure that the technology works. And we're going to do this whole thing again. We're going to keep having these hard conversations because somebody needs to be having them. And if there is one thing we are good at as theater folks, it is talking. And so by goodness, we're going to talk. Antoine, Jess, thanks for being on. I had a great time with you guys this morning.
Me too.
You did a great job.
Breakdown. Yeah.
That's
guys, thanks for watching. You're great. Yeah, you watching on your little thing. You're great. I appreciate it. Hey, make sure you're adding your voice in the comments. Let us know what you think. Like the video, subscribe to our YouTube page, share it on everything. Also, make sure you're here next week, next Sunday, 10:30. We got a little special announcement coming your way. You're gonna want to be here for it. We'll see you then.